Okay.
And she's been unresponsive.
We didn't know where else to take her. There's no hospital near here. That's it.
New documents from the Arizona Department of Child Safety reveal a decade-long trail of chilling details leading up to the death of 10-year-old Rebecca Baptiste. And this is raising questions about what more could have been done to protect this little girl from what prosecutors describe as horrific torture. We are going to break down the multiple reports and explain how it ended this way. And we're going to do it all with a former child abuse prosecutor who knows the ins and outs of this system. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime.
Such a cute little girl.
Weber.
That's a shame, man.
We've been following this horrible story of Arizona 10-year-old Rebecca Baptiste, whose life ended after what prosecutors described as prolonged and maybe some of the worst abuse we have documented here on Law&Crime Sidebar. Because now, new documents from the Arizona Department of Child Safety reveal a history of prior concerns, alleged neglect, maybe even missed opportunities to protect her. Maybe after hearing this, you will make that argument, you will feel that way. And this apparently stretches over a decade.
Hello?
According to the reports, Rebecca and her siblings were the subject of multiple calls to DCS over the years, citing physical abuse, neglect, unsafe living conditions. Many of these allegations were deemed unsubstantiated. There were others that led to temporary removals and dependency cases, but ultimately, the children were returned to their father. And the latest documents also show that at the time of Rebecca's death, some of these investigations were still ongoing. We obtained these reports. We're going to get into these details. But first, for anyone who hasn't been following this case, here's a quick recap. So prosecutors say Rebecca's life was marked by prolonged abuse at the hands of her father, 32-year-old Richard Baptiste,
dude looks like a
and his
freaking
29-year-old girlfriend, Ania Woods.
How did those
she was
two
found
create such a beautiful little girl?
On the ground near a highway intersection on
unbelievable.
July 27th, and tragically died from these injuries 3 days later on July 30th. That is what authorities are alleging. Now, investigators say that Rebecca had been living in this remote home with her father in Woods, and she had apparently run away multiple times. The body cam footage from first responders, it is so hard to watch because it paints a grim picture of what they encountered at this scene.
They found her in the wash.
Okay.
And she's been unresponsive.
We didn't know where else to take her.
Who's her parents?
Oh, sorry.
No, she ran away. She's on medications. And she hasn't been on these medications in about a month.
How long has it been since you found her unresponsive?
We don't know. The neighbor brought her.
When did the neighbor bring her?
It's 11:48. It had to have been probably close to 11.
Did she have any signs of life when she got brought to you?
This looks like
She
the
was
idiot
almost
father,
basically-
am I
She
right?
was slightly responsive. She was still breathing on her own. And then as we were driving this way, started seeing color change in her lips. And we were just all in it.
And you can watch the rest of that dramatic body cam footage in one of our previous episodes of Sidebar. So Rebecca was rushed to a medical facility and she died 3 days later. And investigators, they documented extensive injuries, including bruising in multiple stages of healing, missing toenails, signs of both physical and sexual abuse. Richard Baptiste initially claimed the injuries were accidental, but apparently allegedly admitted to using excessive force.
Oh, maybe that
Woods
wasn't the
reportedly
father. I don't know.
showed
They both
minimal
kind of look like their
concern
mother and
for
father.
Rebecca's condition, despite claiming experience as a certified nursing assistant. And now, both Baptiste and Woods face first-degree murder and child abuse charges. They were initially held without bond, though a judge later set $1 million bond for each of them. The case, by the way, just raises serious questions about prior reports to the Arizona Department of Child Safety, which had been reportedly contacted multiple times before Rebecca's death. And this brings us to the latest developments, the official DCS reports that detail allegations of neglect, abuse, and unsafe conditions that go back 10 years. We are going to break all this down.
That in cases like this, and in cases of severe
Look at
child
these people,
abuse,
man.
it's rare that there be
Who
no
wants to get there and
documented
just slap
history
the
with
you
DCS
know what
or
out
with
of them?
a Department of Welfare for child safety. And so the fact that there is such a robust and documented
boy, makes my
history
blood
of
boil.
concerns being expressed, of reports being made, of essentially calls for help to DCS from school officials is not uncommon. I think what unfortunately is uncommon or singular and tragic in this case is the fact that, of course, the fatality resulted.
And in this case, in the Rebecca Baptiste case, there were these prior allegations that were deemed unsubstantiated But you had others that led to temporary removals, dependency cases. How do we think about that? How should prosecutors, how should child welfare officials, how do they interpret unsubstantiated findings? I mean, what does that tell you?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is something that is a matter of statute. So that's not necessarily something that prosecutors would have any input on, or prosecutors would have any decision-making authority on. So DCF is regulated by certain statutes and by guidelines that dictate that child removal from a home or from parental supervision is a means of last resort. It is something that can only be done if there is clear and imminent danger.
It's really hard for me to hold back
ongoing
the criticism
harm,
I want to say about these two parents,
the child,
just based on their
present,
looks.
it is imminent. And so there is a standard that needs to be met to find that those claims are substantiated, not just that a report was made. Unfortunately, not even if there is evidence that there is bruising or there is injury that is healing. It needs to be a present danger to the child. And according to the DCF records, every time caseworkers went out and responded to the report and checked on the children, there was not a present danger happening. Now, of course, an argument can be made that there is ongoing abuse and the child lives in present danger.
And by the way, there is this idea that you want to make sure that you keep the family intact as much as possible, and you don't want to interfere unless you absolutely have to, right?
I think that is the philosophy behind the guideline, yeah.
Now I want to talk about this legal case. So Richard Baptiste,
I just can't stand
Ania
looking at
Woods,
these two.
they now face first-degree murder charges, child abuse charges, and from a prosecutorial standpoint,
they don't go on looks, right?
These prior
But, I mean,
DCS
look at this guy.
reports,
Does he look
these
like a doctor,
unsubstantiated
a
allegations,
lawyer,
could they
attorney,
be used at trial?
mayor?
Could they factor into proving intent,
come on.
recklessness,
He
knowledge,
looks like the guy you
whatever
don't want to
have you?
meet in a
Could it
dark
actually
alley.
come in?
I think maybe. The quintessential law school professor answer is it depends. So we ordinarily think about any case, any incident, whether we're in criminal court prosecuting someone or civil court where two private citizens are suing each other. We think about those cases as just case specific, as this particular incident. And we don't want to go all corners of the earth to talk about other incidents. It's called other acts evidence. There are specific circumstances and specific exceptions that apply in the rules of evidence that will allow for that other act evidence be considered by the fact finder. In this case, as you mentioned, the fact that there might be evidence of intent, might be evidence of preparation or plan or absence of mistake to show that whatever happened to Rebecca was not accidental, it was in fact intentional, and to show that she had been traumatized, harmed, physically abused in a certain way over a period of time goes to show that there was
She's a
no
school-age
mistake or
kid.
accident.
How come the
In this
teachers would have
particular
seen
case, it was
something
actually
or heard something
an
from her? It
intentional
just
injury
boggles my
that
mind.
resulted in the death.
So let's dive into this. Let's dive into these reports, because as we can clearly see straight from the Arizona Department of Child Safety, this was not the first time that DCS had been involved with this family. According to the documentation that was obtained by Law and Crime, the very first report came on August 29, 2015, alleging neglect by Rebecca's parents, citing concerns about the condition of the home, possible
10
drug
years ago.
use. However, I will tell you, the report notes, quote, the DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegation was unsubstantiated. And according to DCS, that case was still open when a second report came in on May 5th, 2016.
A year
claiming
later.
Rebecca had a severe diaper rash and an ear infection. And DCS again says they found no supporting evidence and referred the family to support services, closing that case a week later. Then you go to October 31st, 2017, another report alleged a 10-month-old child was left alone for several hours. DCS noted the family was provided a list of community resources and daycare, which they declined. So that case was later closed as well. And then finally, there was a substantiated intervention, an instance where DCS actually removed the children from the home. We're going to get there, but first, Professor, now that I've kind of laid out a little bit more detail, what are your thoughts on this? How, when you see multiple reports here, I know they're limited in what they can do, but anybody watching this is going to say, I don't get it.
And I think that reaction is perfectly reasonable. And I think that it goes against common sense to hear all of these instances of third-party actors being so concerned that they're picking up the phone and calling DCS and saying this there is something amiss in this household. This child is not safe. This child is not being cared for. And repeatedly,
Okay, that looks like a picture of her at school.
Unsubstantiated. So I think your listeners
Teachers
would be
surely
reasonable
would have
to
had
say
to see
something was
something,
amiss.
hear something
Someone missed something pretty significant here.
with this
And
kind of
again,
horrific
DCS
abuse.
is going to rest on the language in their statute and the language in their governing regulations that say that the danger to the child needs to be imminent and present. And those factors, according, again, to their caseworkers, were missing in this case.
So after 4 years of reports, right, from 2015 to 2019, there was no meaningful intervention that actually occurred. Now that changed on March 14, 2019, when, according to the report, Rebecca and her siblings were removed from the home following allegations that Rebecca's birth mother had exposed a child to substances during pregnancy. And it is important to note here that Ania Woods, Baptiste's girlfriend, was not Rebecca's birth mother. Okay. But a dependency petition was filed in Maricopa County Superior Court, and services were provided to the family. And this process eventually led to Richard Baptiste being granted full custody of the children in 2022. The children reunited with their father, and the dependency cases were dismissed.
Can you guys look at this guy and not cringe?
Now, by the way, we're actually talking about something happening here, Professor. So when you have a substantiated intervention, you're talking about removal. How does that work exactly? What should we be thinking about that?
So it is a very high level intervention. So we're talking about taking children away from their home, taking children away from their parents, either their biological parents or their legal guardians. And it is not a permanent removal, certainly. I believe in Arizona, the removal period is 72 hours to do an investigation of the home, to have the children placed in emergency placement with a licensed foster home or foster site. And so there is always, and frankly, more likely the possibility that after that 72-hour evaluation that the children will be returned to their home, the place from which they were removed. But if there is a finding after that 72-hour period that the home is not safe to go back to, that if the children were to be returned, that the danger would be present and ongoing, then the children can be more permanently placed in foster care.
So then you go to 2023. And the report shows the first claims involving Baptiste's girlfriend, Ania Woods. And it's starting in November 2023. Reports began surfacing alleging that Woods had scratched a child on the neck. However, the DCS investigation determined that allegation, again, unsubstantiated. According to the report, community supports were provided to the family and all other services were declined by the family. So just real quick, Professor, they don't have to take services, right? And is that not a warning sign? If they're being offered, if there's an allegation that something's going on, they offer them services, they decline those services, that can't be, I don't know what the best way to say it, that can't be used against them, that can't be evidence to remove the children or anything of that nature?
To remove the children, unfortunately, I think not. In a courtroom during this prosecution, it probably could, to be shown that there was every opportunity to avail themselves.
She's not really a looker either, is she,
help
guys?
Of social services that perhaps were needed in this household, and they specifically chose not to, and to continue disciplining the children in a particular way, or caring or not caring for the children in a particular way. So I think that in terms of the homicide prosecution, it is actually pertinent there. I'm not sure it can be so used against them in terms of DCS's action.
Then you go to February 13th, 2024. Okay, so DCS received another report alleging abuse by Ania Woods, and that investigation too was deemed unsubstantiated, and the case was closed. Now, later that year, September, October 2024, there were new reports that emerged alleging physical abuse and neglect, specifically that Rebecca had marks on her hands and her feet, and that the children were being disciplined through exercise. Once again, DCS found no evidence to support the allegations. According to the report, the DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegations were unsubstantiated. The case closed on November 18th, 2024. Professor, I'm not trying to cast blame here, but I have to ask, have there been lawsuits, has there been legal action taken against Child Protective Services in the past? I'm not saying that's what should happen here. I'm not saying they're at fault. Just asking the question.
Well, I would say that's what should happen.
Jesse, there certainly have been. I don't know about Arizona specifically,
There should be a
it is
lawsuit
entirely
against them.
possible to sue a
Child
social
support
service
services.
agency civilly. So the estate or the survivors
Incompetence.
of Rebecca Baptiste would certainly be within their right to investigate legal action or cause of action against DCS. I know very specifically in Pennsylvania, a heartbreaking case from almost a decade ago involved a young girl, a 14-year-old girl named Danielle Kelly, and the social workers from our Department of Human Services who were supposed to be caring for her essentially falsified their records and were not checking on her, were not ensuring that she was being fed and cared for medically. She was 14 years old and she was 42 pounds when she died. And those two social workers were prosecuted and convicted of involuntary manslaughter. So it is entirely possible for there to be both civil and criminal remedies
that makes
when
me so
it comes
angry.
to the neglect of social services.
I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, I'm glad you expanded upon that. I'm not saying that's what should happen here, but when you're looking at these multiple reports,
I'm saying that's what should happen here,
one
folks.
Instance where there was a substantiated
hold somebody responsible. Hold that agency responsible.
Now we go to January 16th, 2025. Okay, so
about 6 months ago.
And there was a report alleging that Richard Baptiste had made Rebecca run as punishment, without, by the way, bathroom or water breaks. And on May 19th, 2025. Woods was alleged to have spanked Rebecca and her siblings. So DCS attempted to engage the family, but they lost contact when they moved to Concho, Arizona. And that investigation was still ongoing when Rebecca's injuries, which would eventually, according to prosecutors and law enforcement, be fatal, were reported on July 27, 2025. Following Rebecca's death, DCS took immediate action, saying, following an assessment of child safety, the other children were removed and placed in a licensed foster home. A joint investigation was conducted with the Apache County Sheriff's Office. The department continues to provide services to Rebecca's siblings. Well, I guess, Professor, that was the time they needed to. I mean, after something like this happens, they had no choice, but at the same time, it's, yeah, I don't know. What do you make of that response?
It is certainly troubling, to say the least, right? I think, though, that what DCF, again, would rest on is that, listen, these are the statutes, these are the regulations that we are governed by. And if there is to be any change in what we can do in terms of removal, in terms of intervening more aggressively, in terms of having more aggressive contact with the family when there is a report that comes through, then these regulations and these statutes need to be amended, and they need to be amended administratively, they need to be amended legislatively, but until that time, DCF will always claim that they are bound by their governing rules.
And two challenges that I wonder here are, one, how do DCS officers, do they know, hey, something is discipline, something is parenting versus something's abuse, right? Maybe exercise there could be a benign reason for that. And two, if you have a family that relocates, I'm sure that's a complicating factor as well.
I think you're right on both those counts. I think there is plenty of case law out there that distinguishes between corporal punishment as child discipline and when it rises to the level of abuse. I think in this instance, there was a documented interview with the father. He did admit to hitting Rebecca with a belt, but it wasn't supposed to do the harm that it did. It wasn't supposed to leave such deep bruises as it did. And so he acknowledges that he was using the belt for discipline, but it may have crossed the line. So an instance like that is a good example of how states do recognize that parents are within their rights to discipline children as they see fit. And if that means in certain families that corporal punishment is accepted, the states are respectful of that decision, but are always mindful that corporal punishment can always cross the line into abuse very quickly.
Oh, she's such a beautiful young girl.
And what the condition of the body was afterwards. I am
tragic, sad, and I don't know how you would ever get justice, folks. What do you think about my comments? Leave your comment in the section. Did I jump the gun? I mean, I'm kind of acting like they're guilty. I know they're not guilty until they're proven guilty in a court of law. They're supposed to be presumed innocent, but I don't think they are, folks. That's just my knee-jerk reaction. Oh boy, this is a tough one, a really tough one to swallow. It really is. Anyway, leave your comment in the section. I hope you like how I curated this video. I shortened it up from the original made it a little bit easier to swallow and assimilate? Leave your comment in the section below. Did I jump the gun on my reactions to these parents, even based on their looks? I mean, that's just how I feel. I'm Captain Kurt. You are watching Captain Kurt Reacts. I'll see you in the next one. Hey everybody, I'm Captain Kurt, and this is Captain Kurt Reacts. I curate content, try to trim out all the fluff to make it easier for you to watch and enjoy informative and provocative content.